when people walk into a church gathering, are they expecting to see and hear? All right, welcome to the Church Dropout channel, and this is another episode, or I guess another edition of It Is What It Is segment of the Church Dropout podcast, where I just talk about, various topics and various things that are on my mind, and maybe some things that I come across online and react to certain videos and different things of that sort. I saw this video, came across my timeline a few times on YouTube, and I don't watch a ton of YouTube. But this came across my timeline on YouTube, and it's Nick Cannon's show, and it had Lecrae and Kirk Franklin on it. Nick Cannon has a show playing spades where, they just, talk while playing cards, and Lecrae and Kirk Franklin were on the show. Now, in watching the whole show, there is a lot to talk about, and I'm sure, some people will. There's just a lot to talk about, and I'm not going to talk about everything as it relates to what took place on the show. But yeah, there were some things there that I think would make great conversation and questioning some of these things. But I will say this just right off the top, just a few observations before I get into what I want to talk about relating to this. It's interesting to me, like when I watch stuff like this, and I don't know, I just pay attention to the comments that people make about Christians. And the comment was made in this video that, one of the reasons why Nick Cannon enjoys the company of these two individuals is because they're like normal people. And I don't know, this idea of Christians not being normal people. Now, I get it. Sometimes Christians can be weird and obsessive, and I get it. Like, sometimes Christians do act abnormal. But I'm not altogether sure I'm not sure that's what he's talking about or what he's saying when he says you guys are normal. I think, what he's really saying is not that they're normal, is that they're just not uptight Christians. They're not individuals that are going to normally talk about the things that other Christians would talk about or point things out, or, they're able to fit in a little bit more and be a bit more normal. And I always think it's interesting when non-Christians say that, because it's interesting that, and I think Nick Cannon would claim that, but I'm not sure he is, but it's interesting, how people claim the church is judgmental one way, all while being judgmental themselves, right? You don't want me to show up authentically who I am. You want me to fit in and be normal, but then you want to turn around and talk about how Christians act a certain way, or talk about certain things or key in on certain things, and they're called abnormal. And that's not the type of people you want to be around. And so I don't know. I just think it's an interesting comment when people make that. I'm not sure it's a compliment. To be honest with you, I think it's, more of a slight to Christians who are practicing their Christianity in a certain way. It almost sets up a fight between Christians who are more expressive of their faith and Christians who are not as expressive of their faith in these types of instances. Another thing that just was interesting to me in watching this is like there still seems to be this desire for Christians to be accepted and authenticated by the world. And this mostly happens in the arts, but for some reason, we're still trying to gain approval of the world. And I feel like, when I watch stuff like this, it's almost like we're fighting to be accepted, whether it's with what we do, like the talents and the giftings that they do. We're just as legitimate as rappers and singers and all of this type stuff as people in the world. But there seems to be this desire for the church to be accepted by the world, like, to be affirmed, by the world. And somehow, like in order to have real relationship with these individuals, you need to be affirmed by them. And this is why I just say, it will never be as Christians, we're called to live a peculiar life, right? That doesn't mean obnoxious. That just means that we're called to live peculiar. We are different. We walk according to a different set of values. And because of that, it's going to, not fit within the way this culture moves. And I think it's a mistake to believe that there's a way to synchronize or to mingle these two, that we can be in these spaces and tone down our Christianity, and as if that's going to actually, feed into our witness to the world, when we can't really be who we are. Now, again, I'm not talking about, being obnoxious as a Christian, and, and again, and maybe that's not even the right word. I'm not talking about, somebody constantly going in somewhere and just, preaching and, and nope, don't do this, don't do that, and all this abstaining Christianity, all this type of stuff. You're like, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm just saying, like, Christians have a hard time in these spaces because people don't want to be uncomfortable in the lifestyle that they live. And so the way they get around that is by saying things like, you're normal when you don't behave a certain way. But there seems to be this still, we still have this desire to be accepted by the world, and we'll never be accepted by the world, simply because the foundation by which our lives are built upon is antithetical to the world's values. It's antithetical to the system that the world lives in. And when I see stuff like this, it just, I don't know, it just blares out to me. I feel like I just can't help but feel like they're toning it down. Right. Like they don't want to go overboard. And so when Nick Cannon makes that statement, it almost puts them on, this uncomfortable place of, now I got to, I got to watch what I do and what I say, because I don't want to be seen outside of that. And, and so I don't know. I just feel like, we're still trying to be accepted, when the reality is that we're just different and peculiar, and our values are antithetical to the values of this world. And so just a couple things. And there were some other things that were in there, some things that were said, and, by, Kirk Franklin, and, and him wanting to be an exotic dancer if he wasn't, doing what he's doing. And I just don't get it. I'm just being real with you. I just don't get the talk. I just don't know why you have to go there in order to, be a part of these, it's not funny. It's just really not funny. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it's not appropriate. And, and there's other things in here too. He's a bit handsy as he is usually on all of it. But, again, that's not really what I want to talk about, but those things are apparent here. What I want to talk about here is a question that the co-host of the show, the female co-host of the show, asked, and their response to that. And she is going to ask her question, but basically she's, talking about secular music that was played in the church, and then, her desire to see a certain type of music done a certain type of way in church that's no longer done in church that way. And, and kind of why is that? And so they answer that question, but I want to, kind of talk about that a little bit, but bring out a point that I've been thinking about as it relates to that, that I think relates to this specific conversation. So I'm going to play this, and then, I'll give my 2 cents.
Y'all, look. So I was at church on Father's Day, right?
That's the only day you went this year? I need you to do better.
Sounding really judgy.
I'm not judging.
Sounding really judgy.
What is that? Is that good? Is that good?
I mean, that's
judgy.
Fine. That's fine.
So I went to church on Father's Day.
Okay, let me just say this real quick. It's the church's fault. The world believes that they participate in the kingdom when they go to church. We've kind of taught the world that going to church is a part of being the church. You understand what I'm saying? Like, that's why I make such a hard distinction between the two. We don't go to the church. We are the church. And when you go to a gathering or an assembly, if you're not going in the spirit as the church, then you're not participating in the things that the church offers to God. But what we've done is we've reduced church to attendance. And so the world believes that they're fulfilling something by attending a gathering, and going to church. And then the whole comment of that's the only time you went. And I know he was just being facetious and joking, but that's the only time you went this year just further makes my point, right? Like, that we believe that church is about attendance and going to see God, but not living in the presence of a faithful God. And I just think it's interesting, but we taught the world to think this way. I mean, the fact that we call what we do on Sunday church, and the emphasis is now placed on the building and what we do in that building weekly, has now become identified with the church and its actions in the world, so much so that the world believes that they are going to church, or that there's a such thing as going to church, when the reality is that the church is the people of God. The church is the people of God, and they go to a place to gather. The church comes together to worship. And so, we've kind of taught the world to think of it that way. And this is why they'll say, I go to church, but it's like, what does that mean? What does that mean that you go to church? I mean, what is that fulfilling? What does that mean? And that's why, like, man, I just think we need to change this language and get back to what the Bible says the church is, and start to live from that, so that we can disciple those properly in the church, outside of the church, as to what the faith truly is. And so, but anyway, let's keep going.
Or whatever. I ain't got no daddy, but I went to church on Father's Day. That's why your story was so great to me, Kirk, because I ain't got no daddy. But anyway, that's not the point. So I went to church, and it was a DJ there, right? Which was really dope. I think that's really cool. But he was playing gospel.
What are we doing? Like, you went to church and there's a DJ there. Like, what part does this play in the gathering of God's community? Like, what part does a DJ play in the gathering of God's community? Like, what is this? What purpose does this serve? And this is part of my point here, but what purpose does this serve? Like, why do we have a DJ at church? Like, why do we have a DJ at church? It makes no sense to me. There's, to me, no justification for having a DJ playing at church. But anyway, let's keep going.
And then he played some cut by Trillville.
He just played the beat.
He played the beat. But this is what I'm saying. Yeah. What is?
Okay, so the DJ's playing a secular beat in church. And this is formulating her question, right? So she's in church. There's a DJ. He's playing secular music, or he plays a secular beat in church. And this is the brunt of her question.
No. Where
was we going?
But you see what just happened right there?
We missed it.
It got tricky. That's what I'm saying. It got tricky because I was like trying to say I never would have made it, but then it was like, what it is. So now I'm twerking in church. And that's crazy.
That's crazy work.
That's what I'm saying.
That's crazy work.
I like choirs. You know what I'm saying?
Right, man.
I'm big on choirs and the
Do you miss choirs?
I do. Like,
but we got Sunday service. You perform with Will Smith at Sunday service.
Why? But when you go to church, there are praise. It's like a praise
team. Praise teams. I like
but
choir.
every church is adapting that style. Yeah. And it can be frustrating for me because I miss.
It was community.
That's crazy.
I don't like praise.
I want to hear whoa.
You know what's funny? Let me tell you what's funny.
Okay, so before, Kirk jumps in here, because he's just going to talk about it, I'm not even sure I want to get back to it. But anyway, he's going to get to, what's essential gospel when it comes to music, and how the choir is essential to what people believe the church is, and, that whole expression. But here's why I'm bringing this up. And you guys heard what she said. So she's in church. And there's a DJ there, and he's playing a secular beat. And I guess they're singing some Christian songs on top of this secular beat. But in her mind, she can't help but think of the true lyrics to that specific song. And as she says, she ends up twerking in church because, that's what you would do to that particular song. First, I don't know why we believe, playing again, like I understand redeem, reject. I forgot what it is. What is it? Redeem, reject. Anyway, whatever it is. Okay. So I understand there are some things that we could redeem. Okay. That we should, that we can redeem and we can use for the furtherment or the advancement of the gospel. Right. And so I get that. But there are some things that I think we can't redeem, that we need to reject, right? And that's because they just don't fit, right? No matter what we do, those things are just seen a certain way or experienced a certain way, and it would just take away from the gospel. And playing secular music in church, especially this type of secular music, to me is just an issue. Like, what purpose does this have being played in church, the beat, and then putting Christian music over it? And again, I would assume that the intent is evangelism, what they would call evangelism, right? That there are people there who are familiar with this and they're redeeming this and they're putting Christian, music to it. And hopefully when they hear this, they're going to be thinking about the Christian version of this and not the version that they're really used to hearing. And it's just interesting to me as to why we would think that way. But then also, why would we do this in church, in a Sunday gathering? And I think her, even though she's not totally making this point, but I understand to a certain degree, I think I understand where she was trying to go. And I've been wondering this for like a long time. Like, when people come out of, quote unquote, the world, right? When people walk into a church gathering, are they expecting to see and hear the world there? Like, are they expecting to hear what they're coming out of? Now, I remember when I became a Christian, when I began to walk with Jesus, this is a better way of saying it, when I began to follow Jesus, when I went to a gathering, I didn't want to hear the world. I wasn't there for that. I came out of that. I didn't need the church to relate to the part of me that I laid down on the cross. So why is it that the church believes and feels like they need to relate to the world by giving them a dose of what they are trying to save them from? I just don't understand it. Right. And I think the point that she's making is like, I didn't come to church for that. Like, I didn't come to this gathering to hear this song. And when I do hear this song, it doesn't point me towards Jesus, no matter what you're saying. It's just really reminding me of what this song is actually about. And I end up singing that. And I just think it's weird that the church thinks that in order to reach the world, we need to be like the world. Right. In order to reach the world, we need to be like the world. And that's different than becoming all things to all men. That's not what Paul was saying, right? That's not incarnational ministry. Incarnational ministry is not becoming, like what it is that you're trying to reach, not taking on the persona of the people that you are trying to reach. And when we look at incarnational ministry, we look at Jesus, right? This is what Philippians 2 says, right? When Jesus took upon himself flesh, Jesus became what he was trying to save, but he wasn't like what he was trying to save, right? He didn't act and behave as such. He just took on the flesh of individuals that he was trying to save. And so anyway, only say that to say, there's this weird idea that we believe in order to be like in order to reach the world, we need to be like them. And we got to pull in aspects of the world in order to influence them. But I'm not sure that's what the world is desiring. I think when individuals come into a saving knowledge of who Jesus is, I think they are coming to experience a different reality, a reality that's built around what their new faith is founded upon. They're not coming to a gathering to hear music that they just walked out of, like they hear music that's attached to a lifestyle that they just walked out of. But it's interesting. We try to take these things and make them Christian, but it ends up having the opposite effect. You know what I mean? And so, it's just interesting to me. And so for her to make this point of, when I go to church, in her mind, she's like, I'm going there to get something very specific that I'm not getting here. But yet when I go into the church, I'm getting the same thing that I got into the world. That I got from the world. And so I don't think people, I think we just need to, kind of erase this myth. I don't think people are going to church to hear what they just walked out of, especially when people have made a saving profession of faith and are now walking by the Spirit, by the power of the Spirit. I don't think that they want to hear what it is that they were redeemed from. I think they want to understand what it means to authentically connect with God. And if we're not careful, again, we're teaching people, I'm not going to say that. I'll save that for another video. I think we need to just be careful here, and we need to honor God in all that we do. And then we also need to be very cautious of how we engage with the world. And so anyway, I just thought this was very interesting. Again, there were some other things that were mentioned, but I'm not sure they were adding to the point. Like I said, Kirk is going to get into the choir thing and, how, choirs are essential to church culture and, she wants to hear X, Y, and Z. And, but again, I think that is also a misunderstanding of what church is. And I'll leave that conversation for another video. But the bottom line is this, that the world doesn't come to the church to hear more of the world. The world comes to the church, or comes to a church gathering in order to understand who Jesus is and how to connect with the loving God and how to understand what life looks like in him, not to relate to the world that they've come out of. So anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Again, I know there's a lot in this video, but that wasn't the purpose of this actual video that I'm doing. But I would love to hear your comments below. Again, always keep the conversation moving forward. Comment below, rate, like, subscribe, wherever you're listening to this at. And yeah, we'll talk soon. God bless.